Well, I have time for us to get started, so let's start with a prayer. Father, we thank you that your Spirit is here with us. We pray that you will guide and direct us and help us to understand your word better. For we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. We've been dealing with the public ministry of Jesus. He has been over at Gergesa, and he is now coming back to Capernaum. He has, at Gergesa's, when he ran into the demoniac, he came running at him, he cast the demons into the swine, and the people said, please leave. We don't want you here. So he left and he heads back to Capernaum. As he comes back to Capernaum, a crowd meets him. After Jesus crossed over by boat, a large crowd met him at the seaside. One of the meeting place leaders named Jairus came. When he saw Jesus, he fell on his knees beside him as he begged, my dear daughter is at death's door. Come and lay hands on her so she will get well and live. Jesus went with him, the whole crowd lagging along, pushing and jostling. Jairus comes. He's begging Jesus, come and just lay hands on my daughter and she will be healed, but she's almost dead. But something happens. A woman who had suffered a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years, a long succession of physicians had treated her and treated her badly, taking all her money and leaving her worse off than before, but had heard about Jesus. Now, stop there a second and state, remember now we're in a healing area with all those hot springs around Galilee. There are a lot of doctors, physicians, and mainly what they did was they just drained people's blood, hoping to drain out the bad blood. She slipped in from behind and touched his robe. She was thinking to herself, if I can put a finger on his robe, I'll get well. Actually, the Old Testament says when the Messiah comes, he will carry healing in the fringe of his robe. So she's just touching the fringe of his robe. The moment she did it, the flow of blood dried up. She could feel the change, and she knew her plague was over and done with. At the same moment, Jesus felt energy discharging from him. He turned around to the crowd and asked, who touched my robe? The disciples, what are you talking about? With the crowd pushing and jostling you, you're asking who touched me? Dozens have touched you. But he went on asking, looking around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened, knowing she was the one, stepped up in fear and trembling, knelt before him and gave him the whole story. Jesus said to her, daughter, you took a risk of faith and now you're healed and whole. Live well. Live blessed, be healed of your plague. This woman has heard about Jesus, heard about healing. She doesn't even ask him to heal her. She just kind of sneaks up behind him and touches him in faith. But Jesus knows she has touched him in faith. Now, she has broken 3 rules. She has 3 things against her. Number 1, she had an issue of blood that makes her unclean, and she came into a crowd. Everyone in that crowd who touches her is unclean. She is supposed to be tinkling a bell and shouting, unclean, so people would stay away from her and would not be polluted by her blood. Secondly, she has touched Jesus. Now, Jesus is going to a religious man's house to use his power to heal his daughter. And she has now made Jesus unclean in his sight. Thirdly, and maybe most importantly, what she touched. She touched the hem of his garment, that fringe of that part that is underneath his garment. It would be like me reaching up under a woman's dress and touching her panties. That is not good, right? That would not be acceptable, right? Only a family member can even touch that. So what's the first word out of his mouth? Daughter. Daughter. He accepts her as part of his family. Now, she has been healed. She got in touch with his power. All these other people touching him didn't. It's not just enough to know that Jesus can heal. It's not just enough to touch Jesus. You have to have faith that something's going to happen. That's the same thing when Cindy serves us communion. Now, we Methodists believe, Catholics believe differently, and some other denominations. We Methodists believe there is nothing magical about what she is doing. Catholics believe it actually becomes the body and blood of Jesus Christ as the priest does the ceremony, okay? Methodists don't believe that. We believe it is by faith. If you don't have any faith that God's going to do anything for you at that moment, you might as well be eating a ham sandwich at home and drinking a Coca-Cola, okay? That's our theology. So you need to, when you go up to have communion, this coming Sunday actually, you need to be thinking, what is it I want God to do for me? What do I have faith is going to happen when I do this? That's something we need to do. That's not Cindy's job. That's yours. I mean, Jesus had power. He was walking down there. The power was in him. But only one person touched him in faith. And that made a difference in her life. Now, we go on with the story. While he was still talking, some people came at the teacher's house and told him, your daughter's dead. Why bother the teacher anymore? Can you see Jairus is just almost deflated? He's been made unclean. My daughter has died. Why would this woman come at this time? My daughter could be alive now. I mean, wouldn't that be what you're thinking? But Jesus says, overheard what they were talking about and said to the leader, don't listen to them. Just trust me. He permitted no one to go in with him except Peter, James, and John. That's the inner circle. Peter, James, and John go in here. Peter, James, and John are up on the Mount of Transfiguration. Peter, James, and John are the ones that go and pray with him in the garden. They're kind of an inner circle of three. They entered the leader's house and pushed their way through the gossips looking for a story, and neighbors bringing in casseroles. Actually, they were mourners. They were crying out, weeping, so that the whole town knows. When you don't have an obituary, what you're doing is they're letting everybody know a death has come to the family. Jesus was abrupt. Why all this busybody grief and gossip? This child isn't dead, she's sleeping. Provoked to sarcasm, they told him he didn't know what he was talking about. But when he had sent them all out, he took the child's father and mother along with his companions and entered the child's room. He clasped the girl's hand and said, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And at that she was up, walking around. The girl was 12 years of age. They, of course, were all beside themselves with joy. He gave them strict orders that no one was to know what had taken place in that room. Then he said, give her something to eat. Notice, how old was she? 12. How long had woman had her issue of blood? 12 years. So when she started her issue of blood, this girl was born. She's had a good life, the other woman's had a bad life, but both of them have been touched by Jesus. Now, why do you think he gave strict orders no one to know what's taking place in the room? Anybody?
Because he'd be overwhelmed. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, basically that's true. If they started passing around, hey, he raised a girl from the dead, then he would be overwhelmed with people. He is overwhelmed with people already, and they haven't even let it get out. He keeps telling people, shut up, don't tell about my miracle. He didn't want people coming to him for the miracles. He wanted them coming for the teaching, so they could listen. The miracles were just simply to prove that his teaching was true. Now, this is the second person he has raised from the dead. The first one was a boy at the town of Nain. Remember, they were coming out the village, out of the town, and he raises that boy. He had been dead for a few hours. This girl had only been dead for a few minutes, maybe. Some were arguing that some argue that she wasn't even really dead. They just thought she was. But in any case, and then he says, give her something to eat. He gets the mother and the father involved in what is going on. So he comes in, everybody's screaming and hollering and moaning. She's dead, the death has come. Jesus puts them out, goes into the room, takes her by the hand, and tells her to get up. And she does. Then he gives her back to her parents, telling, go give her something to eat. As he left the house, he was followed by two blind men crying out, "Mercy, Son of David, mercy on us." When Jesus got home, back to Peter's home, the blind men went in with him. Jesus said to them, "Do you really believe I can do this?" They said, "Why, yes, Master." He touched their eyes and said, "Become what you believe," and it happened. They saw. Then Jesus became very stern. "Don't let a soul know what happened." But they were hardly out of the door before they started blabbing it to everyone we met. And it's interesting, Jesus tells them to shut up, don't say anything, and they tell everyone. He tells us to tell everyone what God has done for us, and we shut up and don't say nothing.
But I can't imagine those parents being able to keep that quiet. That would be something you would have to get out and tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's probably going to get known. I mean, you know, they were mourning her death.
And I bet they had a fear for the Romans, too.
They had what?
I bet there was a fear of the Romans if they started, you know, giving Jesus more accolades than they were giving the Romans and their leaders.
Well, that's probably true, and Jesus is probably also, not only would he be overwhelmed, but he doesn't want to provoke the Romans until his time has come. Also, and as we know, they're going to get provoked pretty well, and the Jewish authorities are going to get provoked. You see, he's out doing good work, so therefore they're upset because they haven't been doing these things. So we have blind people that come to Jesus, and as they come to Jesus, they follow him into his house, and he heals them of their blindness. That would be amazing if you think about it. Now, there was a lot of blindness back then because they didn't have eye surgeons and eye doctors and all. And so he restores their sight, and now they're no longer blind beggars, but they are men that can do good things. Right after that, as the blind men were leaving, a man who had been struck speechless by an evil spirit was brought to him. As soon as Jesus threw the evil tormenting spirit out, the man talked away just as if he'd been talking all his life. The people were on their feet applauding. There's never been anything like this in Israel. The Pharisees were left sputtering. Hocus pocus! It's nothing but hocus pocus. He's probably in the pact with the devil. They have to explain why they're not doing it. Of course, we have to also, don't we? If we're following Jesus, we have the same Holy Spirit in us as he had. Why aren't we seeing these things in the church today? Some people say, well, they just were doing it in Jesus' time and under the apostles to give them authority. I'm not sure I buy that. Now, miracles were not something that happened all the time, every place you looked. In fact, miracles are concentrated around various events. 80% of all the miracles in the Old Testament are concentrated around the book of the Exodus of Israel from Egypt and around Elijah and Elisha. You take those two times in the history of Israel, and 80% of all the miracles you have in the Old Testament correspond to that time periods, which are fairly far apart, maybe 300-400 years apart. But there's, you know, scattered out through the thing, but still those are the two main places you find miracles, and then you move up to Jesus and the apostles. And of course, the Satan. He has Satan, that's why he's doing it, the Pharisees say. Now he goes back to his hometown, Nazareth, again. Last time what happened? Remember? Tried to throw him off a cliff. They said he was evil. But he comes back again. He left there and returned to his hometown. His disciples came along. On the Sabbath, he gave a lecture in the meeting place. He made a real hit, impressing everyone. We had no idea he was this good. How did he get so wise all of a sudden, get such ability? But in the next breath, they started cutting him down. He's just a carpenter. Mary's boy. We've known him since he was a kid. We know his brothers, James, Justus, Jude, Simon, and his sisters. Who does he think he is? They tripped over what little they knew about him and fell sprawling, and they never got any further. The people who know him best think they know so much about him that they reject him. It's interesting. Today, I guess we Christians are the ones who think we know him best, but do we ever reject things he's doing around us because we just can't believe that God would do such a thing? I mean, they didn't believe little boy Jesus. You know, I knew when he was a tot, when he was going to school. I remember him running up and down the streets. You mean he's the Messiah? Gosh, no, that can't be. Jesus told them a prophet was little honored in his hometown among his relatives. On the streets he played in as a child. Jesus wasn't able to do much of anything there. He laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. That's all. He couldn't get over their stubbornness. He left and made a circuit of the other villages teaching. Now that is a really interesting statement. Because they rejected him and didn't have faith in him, Jesus couldn't do any miracles there, except heal a few sick people. I wonder, maybe is that the reason we don't see many miracles in our churches today? I'm just asking. We know him best. We know all about him.
We don't have the faith.
Do we have the faith that in him that things can happen, can change, can multiply and grow? That's what we call revival, I think. But there, it said they're interested. He could not do many mighty works except lay hands on a few sick people and heal them. It's not that he didn't want to, he just couldn't do it. Their faith blocked him from working in their lives. And our lack of faith will block Jesus from working in our lives also, and the Holy Spirit in our lives also. We need to remember that. And it's not that, well, if I have enough faith, Jesus said if you have that little grain of mustard seed, which is like a little piece of dust, just got that much. It's not your great amount of faith, it's who you have faith in that makes a difference. So Jesus is taught in their synagogue and they reject him. Jesus called the 12 to him. He sent them out in pairs. He gave them authority and power to deal with the evil opposition. He sent them off with these instructions. Don't think you need a lot of extra equipment for this. You are the equipment. No special appeals for funds. Keep it simple. No luxury inns. Get a modest place and be content where you're there until you leave. If you're not welcome, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. Then they were on the road. They preached with joyful urgency that life can be radically different right and left. They sent the demons packing. They brought wellness to the sick, anointed their bodies, healing their spirits. I just watched a movie this morning that I recorded a couple of days ago about Francis of Assisi. And this is one of his 3 things that they had. We go off without anything and just let God take care of us. That was one of his tenets of the Benedictine monks he set up. He never asked for anything. He never asked for people to give him things. Well, he did ask for rocks in order to build a church, an actual church building they were working on. But he never asked for food or money. In fact, when people tried to pay him, he would turn it down. They're sent off by twos. It'd be interesting to see who he grouped together. They have a show out, what is it, Chosen? Is that it? And they showed him putting different people together that you wouldn't have thought fit, like Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector, who would have been, And they had to go out together, different people that you would thought would not have anything in common with each other, and they had to go out and do ministry together. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but this is February year 3. By March year 4, he will be dead. So March, April, somewhere in that, that's Passover time. So he's got about 1 more year of ministry to do. He says, stay alert. This is hazardous work I'm assigning you. You're going to be like sheep running through a wolf pack. So don't call attention to yourself. Be as cunning as a snake and inoffensive as a dove. Don't be naive. Some people will impugn your motives. Others will smear your reputation. Just because you believe in me, don't be upset when they haul you before civil authorities. Without knowing it, they've done you and me a favor, giving us a platform for preaching the kingdom news. And don't worry about what you'll say or how you'll say it. Right words will be there. The Spirit of the Father will supply the words. When people realize it is the living God you're presenting and not some idol that makes them feel good, they're going to turn on you, even people in your own family. This is a great irony here. Proclaiming so much love, experiencing so much hate. But don't quit. Don't cave in. It is well worth it in the end. It's not success you are after in such times, but survival. Be survivors. Before you've run out of options, the Son of Man will arrive. A student doesn't get a better desk than his teacher. A laborer doesn't make more money than his boss. Be content, please, even when my students, my harvest hands, get the same treatment I get. If they call me the master dung-face, what can the workers expect? Don't be intimidated. Eventually everything is going to be out in the open and everyone will know how things really are. So don't hesitate to go public now. Don't be bluffed into silence by threats of bullies. There's nothing you can do to your soul. They can do to your soul, your core being. Save your fear for God, who holds your entire life, body and soul in his hands. What's the price of a pet canary? Some loose change, right? And God cares what happens to it even more than you do. He pays even greater attention to you down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. So don't be intimidated by all this bully talk. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. Stand up for me against world opinion, and I'll stand up for you before my Father in heaven. If you turn tail and run, do you think I'll cover for you? Don't think I've come to make life cozy. I've come to make a sharp knife cut between son and father, daughter and mother, bride and mother-in-law. Even cut through those cozy domestic arrangements and free you for God. Well-meaning family members can be your worst enemies. If you prefer father and mother over me, you don't deserve me. If you prefer son or daughter over me, you don't deserve me. If you don't go all the way with me through thick and thin, you don't deserve me. If your first concern is to look after yourself, you'll never find yourself. But if you forget about yourself and look to me, you'll find both yourself and me. We're intimately linked in this harvest work. Anyone who accepts what you do accepts me, the one who sent me. Anyone who accepts what I do accepts my Father who sent me. Accepting a messenger of God is as good as being God's messenger. Accepting someone's help is as good as giving someone help. This is a large work I've called you into, but don't be overwhelmed by it. It's best to start small. Give a cool cup of water to someone who is thirsty. For instance, the smallest act of giving or receiving makes you true apprentices. You won't lose out on a thing. There are costs and rewards to discipleship, he says. There's going to be war and strife against you. People are going to be against you. There are forces in this world that don't want the gospel spread around this world. And they're going to be against you. You're going to be delivered up by your own family members. Remember, family was the most important relationship you could possibly have back then. And to say there's going to be family members against each other is just almost unthinkable. But you'll have power to heal and cast out demons. And so he sends them out. Now, at the same time, something else is happening down in a little place called Makarios. John the Baptist has been in prison there for quite some time. He's had contact with the outside world. Remember, he sent a messengers to Jesus to ask, are you really the one we're looking for? Let's talk about the Herodian kings and rulers. Now, this would be a great soap opera. I'm going to cover this here for you. Antipater I was an Idumean. When Judah conquered Idumea, which is south of Judah, they gave the Idumeans basically two choices: convert or die. He converted and rose up through the ranks of the military. By the time his son Antipater II came into power, he was really pretty high up in the ranks of the military leaders in Judea. When he dies, he had all these sons: Faisal, Herod, Joseph, Phareus, and Joseph through Salome had Bernice. Now, only one of these sons of his is important, Herod. This is Herod the Great. We'll talk about him more in a minute, but his is one called Herod the Great. When Antipater dies, the king also dies in a battle. Herod heads to and is made king of the Jews over this entire area, most of which David ruled at one time. Now he's going to be married to 10 wives. 5 are important. He had 10 wives. He was really paranoid. He married Doris, and she has... Now, Herod is a name you're going to run into in the Bible a lot. You need to be careful which Herod you're talking about. Herod liked the name so much, he named 5 of his sons Herod. They then started going by their middle name. And then one of them had 2 sons named Herod. So there are actually 7 Herods you could bump into in the Bible. He has a wife called Doris who has Herod Antipater. He is the oldest of his sons, but he seems to be trying to take over the throne and kill his dad. So one day while they're down in Jericho in the swimming pool with some of the soldiers, they play how long can Antipater hold his breath underwater, and Antipater loses. Herod had him killed. Mariamne is another one of his wife, and she's going to have Alexander and Aristobulus down here. Now Alexander now is the next oldest, and he is seen to be a pretender to the throne. So he actually has Alexander and his mother Mariamne killed eventually. Now he regrets that. He starts seeing her spirit running around the palace. He names a tower of his palace after Mariamne. He marries another Mariamne, the second. She has a Herod Philip. He marries Maltrace, who has Herod Archelaus and Herod Antipas. And then he marries Cleopatra of Jerusalem and has Philip the Tetrarch. Now, these 3 that are circled will take over power after he dies and rules the kingdom. Now, Mariamne has Alexander and Aristobulus. Alexander's killed, but Aristobulus lives. He marries Bernice. Now, Bernice is his half-brother, his father's half-brother's daughter, whatever that makes her. He marries Bernice, and then eventually he has several sons, including Aristobulus and Agrippa I, Agrippa here, and he has a daughter named Herodotus. Herodotus marries her uncle, her father's half-brother, Herod Philip. They live in Rome. But she, while Antipas is in Rome getting his power. He meets her and he marries her, even though she's still married to Philip and Philip is still alive. Now that's what John the Baptist gets upset about. But that's not the only thing. Salome, Herod Philip's and Herodes' daughter, marries her uncle, Philip the Tetrarch. And then later, she marries her, whatever that is, down here. You see the relationship. She marries Aristobulus down here.
All this is in one chapter of the Bible.
This is not in the Bible. This is history.
Oh,
Now, about 5 of these appear in the Bible.
in the book
Herod,
or what?
well, all the way through. Herod the Great appears. Herod the Great is the one trying to kill Jesus when he's born.
Oh, okay.
Herod Philip the Tetrarch rules the area to the east of the Galilee. Herod Archelaus is the one that takes over after his dad, and when they decide they're coming back from Egypt and they say, oh, well, wait a minute, Archelaus is there, he's worse than his dad, and they end up going to Nazareth instead of Jerusalem. Herod Antipas is the one that tries Jesus during just before his crucifixion. Herod Agrippa II down here is the one that tries Paul when they are in the book of Acts down at Caesarea Maritima. So all of these. Now also Bernice marries her uncle Agrippa I up here and has say. So anyway, like I say, this is a pagan place. To give it you, so let's talk about it more in pictures. Idumea was located here. This was the kingdom of Philistines down here, and here's Judah. When Judah conquered during that time between the Old and New Testament, Idumea, they brought them into power, and Herod the Great now comes to power. He runs to Jerusalem in 37 BC, and the Roman Senate makes him king of the Jews over the entire area. But he's very paranoid. He had 10 wives, and need I say more? And he kills half of his own sons. In fact, the Roman emperor said it's better to be Herod's Weiss than his Weiss. Weiss is pig, Weiss is son. You don't kill your pig because you don't eat it, he's Jewish. From 36 to 26 BC, he consolidates power. He actually has to come back and conquer his kingdom with an army. It has been taken over by the oh gosh, mine's just gone blank. The people east of them that are going to eventually show up as wise men at his thing asking about the one born king of the Jews. But it's been taken over, and Parthians. It's been taken over by the Parthians, and he has to reconquer it. Once he does, from 26 to 14 BC, he's one of the great builders of all times. Ramesses II built the Great built a whole lot of things. Herod the Great built the temple. He built whole cities. He built all over the Roman Empire. He built structures. He was a great builder. It was a great time of prosperity within the nation. People were making money. They were trade was coming in. But then by 13 BC, they hit the bottom. And it's a time of decline when poverty hits. He spent all the country's money on building things all over, and now he has nothing to show for it. See, what happens is when you're building the temple, you got to hire what? Thousands of people to build it. So people are prospering. They have jobs, but all of a sudden those building projects quit, and everybody's without work. And that's a time of decline, and he dies in 4 BC. We know that because he died just as Halley Comet came back, and we can time that astronomically. You know, they can do that really easily. So we know he died in 4 BC. Now, if he's the one that tried to kill baby Jesus, that means Jesus had to be born before 4 BC. Remember, our time, AD and BC, were artificially set up 400 to 500 years after the birth of Jesus. The Roman Pope wanted to, he said it's ridiculous. We have a calendar dating from the time of the establishment of Rome. We need to have it dating from the time of the birth of Jesus. And so they redid the whole calendar, shifted everything around, started numbering dates from the year Jesus was born, and they had a monk try to figure that up, and he missed it by 4 years as he counted back. Now, it was said by Josephus, the history of time period. He was no king, but the most cruel tyrant who ever ascended the throne. He murdered a vast number of people, and a lot of those he left alive were so miserable that the dead might count themselves fortunate. He not only tortured his subjects singly, but ill-treated whole communities in order to beautify foreign cities. He robbed the Jews. Oh, let me see here just a second. He robbed the Jews. Okay, I'm trying to read off my computer here. He made gifts to foreign nations and were paid for with Jewish blood. The result was that instead of their former prosperity and time-honored customs, the people fell victim to utter poverty and demoralization. Within a few years, the Jews suffered more misery through Herod than their forefathers had done in the long period since they left Babylon and returned under Xerxes. So he was kind of a bad ruler. Now, once Herod the Great dies, his 3 sons, this is Herod Philip here, lives in Rome. This is this is Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus. The country is divided between these 3. Herod Archelaus rules Judea and Samaria. Herod Antipas rules Galilee and Perea. And Herod Philip rules in this area over here. Now, Archelaus, he rules from 4 BC to 6 AD. He rules 10 years. He is a very bad, cruel, worse than any of the other sons. He doesn't do well. People are constantly rioting, constantly complaining about him. Eventually, he is removed and a Roman procurator is put over Judea, and that is why we have the Roman procurator Pontius Pilate there during the trial of Jesus. Herod Philip rules in Bithynia and Trachonitis from 4 BC to 34 AD. He ruled 38 years. He's married to Salome, the one who danced, Herodotus' daughter. Now, we don't actually have the name of the girl who danced, Herodotus' daughter, but she did have a daughter named Salome, and people think that's who did it. He rules this area right over in this area. So here's Galilee. There's an international border right here between Galilee and Philip. 2 different kings, 2 different rulers, and that international taxing point is a place called Capernaum. Then we have Herod Antipas. He's the one Jesus bumps into fairly regularly in the in the Gospel. He ruled Galilee and Perea from 4 BC to 39 AD. He's the longest Herodian ruler. He married a Nabatean princess, the daughter of Aretas. She was a princess, and he married her to form an allegiance with the Nabateans, who were very powerful trade people. But while he was in Rome, he met Herodotus, his brother's wife, and he loved her, and he decided to marry her. John the Baptist goes ballistic. John the Baptist isn't the only one that goes ballistic. Aretas, her father of the divorced now princess of Nabatean, goes ballistic also. He imprisons John. He's also the one, this is the who Pilate sends to him for judgment. Eventually, in 37 AD, he is deposed and exiled to Gaul. Agrippa I ruled the whole area as king from 37 to 44 AD. This is him right down here. He rules the whole area again that Herod the Great up here, I guess that's his grandfather, ruled at one time, and he will rule from 50, he will rule till 50 AD. At that time, Herod Agrippa II, his son, takes over power, rules king of the Jews for another 43 years. He has a sister named Bernice, and they live together. Even though they're both married, they live together. I'm not going to say any more. All we know is they live together. He was the one that heard Paul's case in Caesarea during the book of Acts. So I just wanted you to understand that there's going to be a lot of Herods, there's going to be a lot of people as you read through this area. They're different people, they're all kind of related to each other, and this is how the throne has been changed. I'll have a blank chart for you next week, and you can fill in the names.
They had multiple wives back then. Exactly when did they stop doing that, multiple wives? Did that gradually happen, or did it?
Herod didn't have multiple wives at any one time. These are wives that he had that died or were divorced. He was married, divorced, married, divorced. So he had 10 wives, but like Henry VIII only had one wife at a time.
But they had divorces back then.
Yes, they had divorces. You could divorce a woman just because she burnt your toast. It literally says because she finds disfavor in your sight. Now, the Jews argued what that meant. The more liberals argued that if you burnt your toast. The more conservative Jews believed that you had to have sexual sin, basically committing adultery.
So the men ruled everything.
Pretty much so. Women didn't even have inheritance rights.
Yeah.
If you died and your wife wouldn't receive anything, your children, your sons would. They divided equally. Well, they break it up. How many sons you got? One. So he'd get the whole thing. But if you had 3 sons, they break it into 4 pieces. The oldest son gets 2, and the rest get 1. And the oldest son would rule the family.
But the daughters don't get anything.
No. They're looked at to be, that's why you marry them off. And you make alliances through them with other families. Herod was the one who ordered the arrest of John, put him in chains, and sent him to prison at the nagging of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had provoked Herod by naming his relationship with Herodias adultery. Herodias, smoldered with hate, wanted him to kill him, but didn't dare because Herod was in awe of John. Convinced that he was a holy man, he gave him special treatment. Whenever he listened to him, he was miserable with guilt, and yet he couldn't stay away. Something in John kept pulling him back. But a portentous day arrived when Herod threw a birthday party, inviting all the brass and the blue bloods in Galilee. Herodias, his daughter, entered the banquet hall and danced for the guests. She dazzled Herod and the guests. You notice it doesn't give her name. Tradition says it's Salome. The king said to the girl, "Ask me anything, I'll give you anything you want." Carried away, she kept on. "I swear I'll split your kingdom, my kingdom with you if you say so." She went back to her mother and said, "What should I ask for?" "Ask for the head of John the Baptizer." Excited, she ran back to the king and said, "I want the head of John the Baptizer served up on a platter, and I want it now." That drove the king up fast, but unwilling to lose face with his guest, he caved in and let her have her wish. The king sent the executioner off to the prison with orders to bring back John's head. They went, cut off John's head, brought it back in a platter, and presented it to the girl, who gave it to her mother. Then John's disciples heard about it. They came and got the body and gave it a decent burial. Makarios is located right here on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. It looks, the Dead Sea. I'll get it right. It's on the eastern shore of the Dead Sea. It looks like this. It was a hill, and it was fortified on top with a palace. Herod had married Herodias. He was met when they were in Rome. But he had come now, after being made king, he has come to Makarios to celebrate his birthday, but to do something else. The Nabateans are up in arms about the princess being sent back in such shame. They're coming with an army to attack Herod. Herod is there in Macarios to celebrate his birthday, but also raising his army to go and fight the Nabateans. They will fight 3 days later. Herod is vastly defeated and runs for his life. Most of the Jews said that's because he killed John the Baptist. They thought that was God's revenge. Salome comes out and dances. Now, truth be, she probably was naked. That's the way they usually, the girls danced back then. So think of, Biden doesn't have a daughter. Well, she may. Think of Biden's daughter coming out and they're having a cabinet meeting and she dances for him in the neck, nude. You know, this is really a very gross thing. It's really a very controversial thing, but she gets Herod's attention. And Herod probably had lust for her. And Herodotus probably knew that and had her sent out to dance. And then they said, what am I going to ask for? Get the head of John the Baptist. He's beheaded and taken away. The head's brought to her on a platter, and John's body is taken away by his disciples. Now, back in Galilee, Jesus hears word that his cousin has been killed. This may be the only person who really understood Jesus. I mean, think about it. He had heard from God. He had gone out on ministry when things weren't popular. He took an unpopular stance. Now he's seemingly alone. But at the same time, the disciples who have been out on this mission trip have come home, and they're sharing about all the wonderful things that have been happening while they're there. But the crowds are all around them. It is madhouse. The apostles then rendezvoused with Jesus and reported on all that they had done and taught. Jesus said, come off by yourselves. Let's take a break and get a little rest. For there was constant coming and going. They didn't even have time to eat. Jesus is probably down. He's probably not feeling good. I think Jesus got upset his cousin was killed. So he wanted to just get some time away from everybody. So what do? They hop in a boat and they head out on the Sea of Galilee to go someplace. Now there's a problem. If you see Jesus get in a boat, since you can see the whole Sea of Galilee from any one point, it's easy to follow that boat, isn't it? So they see him get in the boat, and so they got in the boat and went off to a remote place by themselves. Someone saw them going, and the word got around. From the surrounding towns, people went out on foot, running, and got there ahead of them. When Jesus arrived, he saw the huge crowd at the sight of them. His heart broke. Like sheep with no shepherd they were. He went right to work teaching them. When his disciples thought this had gone on long enough, it was now quite late in the day, they interrupted. We have a long way out in the country, and it's very late. Pronounce a benediction and send these folks off so that they can get some supper. Now, he didn't go very far, probably. Tradition says he went from Capernaum to a place called Tabgha. But as you can see, this is the entire Sea of Galilee here. This is on the hills overlooking Capernaum right down here. You can see him easily out on the shore. So they can follow along, and you can probably run as fast as you can row on the water. So he arrives at a place called Heptapagan or Tabgha. Heptapagan means 7 springs. There are 7 freshwater springs that bubble up there. And he's come to Tabgha. This is Tabgha today. Capernaum is really just off the map here. This little place right here is supposedly marks the place where Jesus is going to feed the disciples after his resurrection. And over here is the place of the multiplication of the fish. And up here on the hill, just to the off this picture, is where he taught the Sermon on the Mount. So this is all around this area things have been happening. Again, here's the primacy of Peter, they call it. The church here, and up here is where he fed the 5,000, supposedly. This is a church that's built there over old ruins that have been built there. It's called the Church of the Multiplication. It has cloisters there. This is their baptismal font that they had back in the 300s, and you know, it's kind of cross-shaped. Had mosaic floors, beautiful mosaic floors. depicting scenes from the Nile River, the animals that are there from the Nile River. Probably the guy that did the mosaic floor for the old church back in 300 AD was from the Nile River, and he has depictions of animals from that area. This is the altar area. You can see they have a symbol of the loaves and fishes. Supposedly this rock is where he laid the fish and loaves of them to multiply them. Who knows? But remember, there were 5 loaves and 2 fish. It wasn't this. Think of 5 biscuits and 2 sardines. It's a little boy's lunch. I mean, this little boy couldn't eat all of this. 3-pound fish and big loaves of bread. This is the inside of the church. These are all stone churches. This one was built partially during the Crusade times. Remember, they sang the liturgy, so it's good for singing, bad for talking. It kind of echoes real big inside. Looking up at the altar area here. This is Jesus' 3rd Passover. We know it's Passover because it said, back up. It's the 3rd Passover. We know it's Passover because it says that there's a lot of grass around. Back up some more. It's his 3rd Passover. He talks to the people for quite some time. And then Jesus says to them, "You do it. Fix supper for them." And they reply, "Are you serious? We want us to go spend a fortune on food for their supper?" But he was quite serious. "How many loaves of bread do you have? Take an inventory." It didn't take long. 5. He said, "and 2 fish." And it's actually the word small fish. Jesus got them all to sit down in a group, and 50 or 100. It looked like a patchwork quilt of wildflowers spread on the green grass. That's how we know it's the spring. Took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, lifted the face to heaven in prayer, blessed, broke, and gave the bread to the disciples, and the disciples in turn gave it to the people. He did the same with the fish. They all ate their fill. The disciples gathered 12 baskets of leftovers. More than 5,000 were at the supper. So the people have come, they have listened to him, they break them into groups, and all they have to feed them is a small boy's lunch. But they have 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Now, these loaves are probably pretty good, large, even for a boy's lunch, and fish also again. He breaks them and he starts breaking these up and handing them out to the disciples. And the disciples start carrying it around to everybody, and everybody eats their fill. And then they're commanded to take up what's left over. And what's left over is 12 basketfuls, large basketfuls. How many apostles were there? Oh, so each one of them had a basket to take home. Or maybe they gave them all back to the boy for his help. Who knows? We don't know. Now, I believe, personally, it was a miracle that Jesus, the fish and bread just multiplied. Some people say, well, everybody had food in their pockets and they just didn't want to share. And when Jesus started sharing, everybody else shared. Why do we have to try and do away with miracles? If you believe there's a God, you got to believe there's a miracle. It's only God working in his creation. If he can create this world, he surely can create more fish in baskets to feed people. The people realized that God was at work among them in what Jesus had done. They said, "This is the prophet for sure. God's prophet right here in Galilee." Jesus saw that in their enthusiasm, they're about to grab him and make him king. So he slipped off and went back up the mountain to be by himself. He heard a voice that he did not like. He'd heard that voice at the beginning of his ministry. Just turn these rocks into bread and the people will follow you. If you feed them, they'll follow you. And now what's happening? He fed them, and what happened? They're going to make him king. He's hearing the voice of Satan in these people. Satan didn't leave him alone. He came back. All you have to do is just feed them. See how easy it was? You don't have to go to that cross. That's not what you have to do. Don't go to the cross. Just feed them. They wanted to take and make him king. I'm going to stop there. I know we've got a few more minutes, but